Welcome everybody to the 9/11 Tribute Museum's virtual My 9/11 Story. Today you will be hearing a personal story from Sonia A, who is a 9/11 recovery worker and also the wife of a 9/11 first responder. As this will be on YouTube, if you have any questions for Sonia as you watch this, please feel free to add them to the comment section, and I'll be happy to get those questions over to Sonia to get them answered for you. So without any further ado, I'll give the floor up to Sonia to share her personal story. Sonia?
Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Kwaku said, my name is Sonia. I was a recovery worker in the days after September 11th. My husband was a first responder with the NYPD. That morning was a really fabulous morning for our family because it was my husband's 51st birthday. I had some errands to run, totally assuming that we would see each other later on in the afternoon. When I got to my destination in Midtown Manhattan, about an hour or so later, we were told we had to evacuate. Um, Being a first responder myself with emergency medical services, I didn't panic. I thought maybe it was a gas leak. As it turned out, when I got downstairs, it was wall to wall people. And that was something I really had not experienced. And then I saw fighter jets, and I knew that something was terribly wrong. Within seconds, my cell phone went off, and it was my husband, and he was telling me, listen to me carefully, we are under attack. You need to get on the next bus out of Manhattan. The problem with that was we got cut off. So I really didn't know where the attacks were happening. I kind of made the assumption it was where I was because there was so many people there. By the time I got to my bus stop, however, the city had shut down and I still didn't know what was going on. And so I found a hotel, got into the lobby, there was a television, and well, on all televisions, they were replaying the first and second, well, I would say the second plane hitting the building. And so when I saw that, I wondered where my husband was calling me from, that he knew so much information. Um, then I saw the towers go down. And my job teaches me to focus, and that's just what I had to do. I now had to focus on getting information and how to get out so I can get home to my 16-year-old daughter. Within hours, and I'm going to tell you right off the bat, time went by so quickly, I cannot ever give you a time when all this happened. But I know it was later on in the afternoon when we saw at the bottom of the television screen where the mayor was opening up the city for a short time. So there was a group of people heading my way. So we all took a cab, came home, and I saw my daughter. She was 16 years old, sitting on the floor, hugging her niece. I went to comfort her, and I could hear her say, "Let her be for real." And it was that moment that I realized automatically. I knew my husband had gone to pick her up, dropped her off. I knew there was a total recall. That this is quickly in my head. Both she had watched everything on television by herself. So she naturally was assuming that her dad was gone and that I had gone myself to help. As I went to comfort her, the phone at home rang, which was very bizarre because there was no phone service for us here in New York. And we picked it up, and it was my husband. And this time his voice was very different. You can hear all the radio chatter from behind. Everyone is yelling out commands and what have you. And he's talking about how dark everything is, which made no sense to me because it was still that bright, beautiful day. He's telling me that everything was gone, which again made no sense to me. And then he started to talk about that it looked like snow. Everything was gray. He even made a comment where he said, I don't even know if I'm looking at a human being unless someone is crying, because then I can see the tears coming down. Everybody was covered in a gray suit. And as a matter of fact, it was a little bit darker than what I'm wearing. And then he said, I'm getting assigned to Tower 7. I will call you at 10. And we said, I love you. We said goodbye. And, you know, I can't tell you that I was happy. We were more relieved because I understood the enormity of the situation. And I knew that there's nothing to be happy about. There was just big, major concern. And so a few minutes after that, the phone rang again and we picked it up. And this time it was a friend from Tennessee. And as she was talking, I immediately realized that she could get through. And so I stopped the conversation and I gave her some numbers and I told her to call the family to tell them that we're okay, to let them know where Joe was. And that's when there was complete silence. And that's when I was informed that Tower 7 had gone down. Now, the next part I really don't remember. My daughter tells me that neither one of us remember that I hung up, but I know that I grabbed my daughter because she felt it was so unfair that we had just spoke to daddy and now he's gone. And I held on to her and I said, without hope, we cannot cope. So we're going to wait until 10 o'clock. That's the time we have. And until then, we pray. But daddy never called. And it was hard. Those were the longest hours ever. And I remember thinking I didn't want the daylight to come. I didn't want to start the day without him. I didn't want to have to do something different that I knew I would eventually have to do one day. But it was daylight. And people asked us, we had neighbors in the house, and they asked us, what did Joe and I ever discuss? Seeing that he's a police officer, you always have to prepare. And I didn't want to discuss it because I thought if I discussed it, it would be too final. The only thing I remember thinking was that he had to come home because I didn't have time to be me. I didn't have time to be a wife. I had to be a mom. And it was hard to deal with that. And within seconds, I'm going to assume it was seconds, the door opened and he walked in. And I did the same thing that my daughter did. I just stared at him because it was hard for me to accept that. Did he really walk in through the door? And the look on his face, I could tell he was not the man I said goodbye to the day before. Something had changed. And I didn't have to guess what it was. I was just involved with him coming home. And he's a 6 foot tall guy, at the time, he was very husky. And to see him walk in covered in soot and he just put his head down and said, I'm injured. You need to sew me up. I need to go back. I didn't ask any questions after that. I just cut him up and that injury was really bad. And I told him there was no way I can do it. And his response was, if I have to go to the ER, they're not going to let me come back and I need to go back. And I understood that. And selfishly, I really didn't want him to go back. But I understood, when you're a first responder, you understand the reason why you need to be where all the tragedy is. That's what you're trained for. And so he went home. But the really sad part was that he didn't hug us for days. He didn't talk to us. And we needed that. And it was just very hard for him to do. And it was just something he just couldn't do. And on the third day after 9/11, he came home and he sat down and he had a piece of paper and I grabbed it from him and the names there were very familiar. And he said, they're gone. And I made the assumption that they were relieved from duty. And he said, no, our friends are gone. My partners are gone. And that was when my daughter and I thought, we for the last few days, it's okay, everything's okay. We weren't thinking of anything else. We just couldn't. And now we had no choice. So that Monday, he went back to work. My daughter, he was working all this time. My daughter went back to school that Monday. And I have to tell you, being a first responder, I really never had really that kind of fear. But driving her to school, I had fear. I didn't even want her to go to school, but she had to be a student. Life had to go on. And just as I was letting her out, she decided she wasn't going to school. She decided she couldn't leave me alone. And she became very emotional. And I became very patriotic. I came and told her that she had to go to school. She had to do the things that she had to do because this is what terrorism does to people. It terrorizes them. It stops them from living. And we're not going to do that. And she went off to school. But I didn't believe one word I said. So I drove under some trees and I sat there until she got out of school. And that would be what I would do for about 10 days. And every day she got out of school, she asked me how my day was. And I made up some really great stories until one day she asked, and as I was getting ready to say, she put her hand over mine and she said, "Mom, we're going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. But I can see you out the window." And I was so mortified because you don't lie to your children, but I didn't know what else to do. I wanted her to be 16, and I explained that to her. And it broke my heart when she said, "I'll never be 16 again." And so now 9/11 again took something else from our lives. Well, I felt that I had sent her a very bad message. And that message was to give in to fear. And so I made a few phone calls and they assigned me to ground zero. And those first 2 days were hard because I didn't know anybody. And all I could see was these really big bright lights and particles going up there. And I just did what I was assigned to do. And on the third day, I was asked by a group of people if I wanted to go to the pit. Everybody calls it ground zero, but it was known to us as the pit. And I thought, why not? And I went and we prayed and I asked very naively, where was everything? Because now I'm seeing it for the first time for real. And someone hugged me and they said, "Well, you must be from New York." And yeah, I saw everything that I knew all my life was gone, completely, totally gone. It still didn't make sense to me, but now I had no choice but to accept it. And I went back to my assignment, and for some reason that changed me. I don't know what changed in me, but I wasn't scared. And ironically, they assigned me to first responders, and I took care of them from the minute they walked in until they were ready to go to their sleep quarters. That was the hardest part for them and for me because many of them didn't want to go to sleep. They didn't want to close their eyes. They didn't want to relive what they had just seen. And I just sat and talked to them for hours, it seemed. And this is the way it went for a long time. I stopped volunteering right before the holidays. And then my husband stopped working downtown, I'm going to say about January, February. And we didn't talk about 9/11 at all for a good 7 years, not even on his birthday, which is 9/11. It was a very taboo subject. And what we didn't realize was going on was that we were becoming a fractured family. Because when you don't talk about something that traumatic, that tragic, that sad, you internalize it and it comes out in other ways. And so my daughter by this time now is in college, and I looked up volunteer opportunities, and the first thing that came up was the tribute center. And I thought, well, okay, this is a sign. I went in, did my interview, and I thought they were absolutely crazy, asking people to tell their stories. Like, who would want to hear what I went through? I realized that their 9/11 was not only about 2,983 people that were murdered and the families left behind. There were stories about first responders, recovery workers, residents, and survivors. And those stories needed to be told. And I felt honored that I could do that. And I found healing. I was able to talk to strangers and just tell them what happened and how I felt. And I can't tell you how it's like a balloon popping and the air was slowly coming out. It was a great relief. And I convinced my husband, it took me a while. I convinced him to become a docent. It took me about 3 years, 4 years. And the sad part about him becoming a docent was that he never told me his story. He never told me what he experienced. And now I'm hearing it for the first time on a tour. And every time we did a tour, he'd remember one more thing. And I had to hear it 7 years later. And you have to relive it, and so that was pretty hard, and I understood why my husband was the way he was now. So we decided after a while that we were very blessed because we were starting to hear that our friends were sick, and some of our friends had died from the toxins that they breathed in. at Ground Zero. And we thought we were so lucky that we were there and it didn't affect us. And we spoke too soon. My husband wound up with cancer. And between the both of us, we have about 12 different illnesses. I have a terminal illness, and just to be clear, terminal means there's no cure. So it's not that I'm going to die tomorrow. It just means that there's no cure for what I have. And so we have decided that every tour that we do, every talk that we do, we talk about that because there are so many people who are dealing with what we're dealing with. And a lot of people don't know that. They just don't. And we settled into a life of gratitude and comfort until COVID came. And now we were facing another enemy. And this time there was nothing we could do because our immune systems are compromised. So we can't be frontline workers anymore. But I found a way, you know me, I'm going to find a way. And so I went to my old retiree group and we decided that we were going to home cook meals for a lot of medics that came out of town to help us, transporting patients and just taking house calls because people just couldn't go to hospitals. And that, once again, it put us in a fearful position because we were risking our lives. We didn't know, everyone was taking precautions, but we didn't know how serious this could be for us. But we did it nonetheless. And we did it because 9/11 taught us that you just can't give up on your community. It taught us that you have to be stronger than you think you are. And you have to be the change. You have to be the change you want to see in the world. And there was so much anger and so much confusion over this COVID. And so many of our friends were dying because of COVID. And we're dealing with this once again. How do we do it? And we found a way to do it through helping others, because you can't keep this kind of stuff to yourself. You just can't. And so I hope that anything that I've said to you today, if anything inspires you, I don't want to make you sad. I don't want you to leave here feeling sad. Don't feel sad, because this is life. We're living it. I could have told you a different story. But I want to leave you with, especially if you're young, life, you're going to deal with some kind of tragedy that's going to change you. I promise you, you will, and I promise you it's going to change you. Let that change be positive. Let that change be something that makes a difference. I have a saying that I've always loved. You can mourn that roses have thorns, or you can celebrate that thorns have roses. And we choose to celebrate. We choose to live life to the fullest, because tomorrow's promised to nobody. And we learned that lesson for the last 20 years. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm here, and so is Kwaku, wherever he is right now. Did I lose you, Kwaku? There you go.
No, I'm here. Well, as always, Sonia, thank you so much for sharing your story and for your inspirational message. It's definitely something that's needed now and really always needed. So I really hope that you all take away that inspirational message. As Sonia noted, if you do have any questions for her, please feel free to add them to the comment section, and I'll get those questions over to Sonia, and I will reply to those for you. Once again, Sonia, as always, it's always an honor and a pleasure. Can't wait to see you soon.
Oh, yes.
And actually, if you're watching this, follow us on Instagram at 911 Tribute Museum, as we also do live programs on there as well. So if you ever want to catch Sonia in real time, you can catch her on there frequently as well. So once again, Sonia, thank you so much. And we will see you all next time.
Bye-bye.